Flow software helps manufacturers and operations turn data into information that they can trust and openly share. I'm Jeff Knepper, and I appreciate the opportunity to walk you through the process of exactly how Flow helps organizations and individuals become expert data storytellers. As you look at the list of different KPIs and pieces of information that, frankly, every operation would like to have, how many do you currently have? What's the roadblocks that are keeping you from having this information available for your teams and providing this information across your enterprise for comparison? Well, if we look at how we actually turn data into information and how we have done that historically for the last 30 to 40 years, I think you'll quickly identify the roadblocks. Let's take a look at the first step. We have to be able to connect to the data sources, the producers, typically databases and systems located at our site or at our plant, sometimes enterprise systems, but we need to be able to connect and ingest the raw data from those systems. Once we do that, then we have to cleanse that data. It's difficult to bring data from multiple systems and then compare it to one another and cleanse it based on one another, because that data is living in systems that have different formats. The timestamps don't ever line up. The underlying data infrastructure may not be there. I might not even have a license that makes it easy for me to access some of these systems. But once we do have that access, then we have to compare that data to one another, cleanse it, remove the outliers, remove the bad quality, and then begin to add context. Looking at data from one system and comparing it to the state of a process that has been recorded in another system, for instance. Then we can perform calculations. So historically at that point is when we start creating new pieces of data, combining tags or combining data points from multiple sources and filtering that data. Then we can slice that data into KPIs, aggregate that data, and validate the results before finally having actionable insight. Now, this is, again, how we've done it for years. And it's the right steps. Nothing has changed there. The issue is that after we've done that and we ship that insight off into the application, we need to understand where this work has been living for so long. And this is the key to why it hasn't been scaling. All of that integration work has been living inside of either an application that is on the data producer side. So maybe you've been trying to do this inside of your historian, or it's been living in an application over on the enterprise side. So why doesn't it work if we try to do it on the data producer side or on the site side? A lot of the complexity is the fact that we don't have the same systems at each site, and each of these systems has really been optimized for the type of data that it uses and handles. So I can't build great integration pieces inside of a time series historian if I need to bring in a lot of transactional data that is stored in SQL tables, for instance. And if I did it inside of the historian, what happens when I go to the next site and I don't have the same version or the same vendor for that historian? All of that work is not going to transfer. If I do the work over on the enterprise side, I'm going to have more capability, meaning I'm going to have a different talent pool that's going to be able to do that work. And I might just say, well, if I bring everything over to Snowflake, for instance, or all of my raw data to a data warehouse, I could do the work there. But then we lose all of the context that lives over on the site. Our subject matter experts have so much context that needs to get added into the data in order for it to be properly turned into information. The other problem with doing it at the enterprise level is that every time we pick another application and connect those sources and do all of that work, when we pick the next application that we want to use, so first we've used Power BI and now we say, oh, we also want to do this in Seek or Tableau or Sisense, or I need to bring this over to my data warehouse or to Azure, a machine learning tool I'm looking at, a new dashboard or report that's been asked for, an email notification system, an MQTT broker, and so on and so on. Every single time I draw another line, I have to do more data integration work. And we know that that is not going to scale. We know that it just creates too many places to try to have to govern the work that's been done, the engineering work, the rules around how we process data. Our business rules have to have a centralized place to live. So Flow solves this problem by positioning itself directly in the OT-IT convergence space. 1 foot at the plant, 1 foot at the enterprise. There's a value exchange. We will add value to your operations day one. In return for the value that we're adding, we will pick up more context from your subject matter experts. We give them value, they give us context. It's a beautiful continuous loop. And then from the enterprise side, we will take that operational data that's been contextualized by your subject matter experts, and we'll deliver it everywhere that you would like it to go. So Flow's solution is really focused around 3 things. 1 part, data modeling and templating. 1 part, the performance or the running and execution of all of the calculations that you need. And then 1 part, distribution or information hub. Our mission is simple. We want to supercharge your decision making. It's worked for companies all around the world of all sizes, and we know it'll work for you. Let me show you exactly how we do it. So we start by connecting to the appropriate enterprise and operational data sources. And those data sources are quite varied. Everything from SQL databases to every flavor of historian, real-time data brokers, laboratory and quality systems, maintenance systems, manual entry. That's a huge factor that often gets neglected. CSV files, a web API, if you name it, Flow has a way to connect to it. And using these connectors, we're able to easily extract the raw information that we need in order to begin to model that data. Let's build out a little example. If we just think about an MES system and a data historian. Our MES system is likely SQL based. We have a table. The table has a series of properties, one of which might be batch ID. We'd want to collect that batch ID, and we'd probably also want to collect a start and a stop time of that batch. Inside of the historian, we will have a couple sensors that we want to pick up. In this case, a temperature sensor and a machine state tag. So as we begin to model this data inside of Flow, we can start with an event. We can define the event start. It could be a tag that triggers the start of the event. It could be reading the SQL table and seeing that we have a property called start time. And then we add attributes to that event. Attributes might be something like what is the actual batch ID number, or what is the product code that we're making, or who is the customer we're making this for. With the event configured inside of our model, then we can also begin to build a metric. And a metric is just something that I want to measure. So metrics and events work hand in hand. Also part of a metric is the concept of linking data from my underlying data sources into a tag in Flow. So in my historian, I have a temperature sensor and I have a state tag. So in Flow, I create a link to that data. I don't replicate it because I want to leave the underlying data in the validated data sources. There's no reason to bring all of the raw data into Flow. Instead, I'll create a link so that as the temperature value is changing, I have that available to me inside of Flow. Notice that I've also done an alias of the naming structure that is inside of the historian. The beauty of an information model is that I can use easy to understand naming conventions instead of the naming conventions that I often would have to live with inside of a site ecosystem. So now that I have my event named with attributes and I've created a metric and I've linked tags as part of that metric, now I can create a calculated tag. So I'm following the steps that we've outlined before, connecting to data, calculating, contextualizing. And in this step, as creating a calculated tag, my batch temperature, I can choose to nullify and eliminate data that's anomalies or outside of band. And I can also begin to filter my data based on state. So here I might only want to collect temperature and have temperature inside of my batch temperature tag when my state is of a certain value. This is crucial because Flow gives me the ability to pull data from multiple sources, multiple formats, multiple data structures and present it as one single tag in the system. Once I have that tag, then I can begin to slice it by time interval. So in this case, I'd like to, every hour to run an average of the raw data that is associated with the batch temperature tag and record that value, write it to disk inside of the Flow database. We pull the raw data at the end of each hour. We process the data, cleanse it, aggregate it, calculate it, and then export it into our own database or send it to our own database. With this average data date, I've got a running average that is totalizing throughout the day. I can then also further contextualize that data by taking my established event, my batch run, and slicing that hourly average temperature and grouping it into batch events. So now I know every hour what has been my average, and I know across my batches what has been my average. One of the great things that this methodology allows for is the templatization of these definitions and these rules. So by creating templates, I can then deploy my templates to all of my different instances where I'd like to run this calculation. Flow gives me a template library that I'm able to manage. I do that corporately. So I have one place that I'm able to govern my engineering effort. How have I actually built the calculation? I'm able to govern the definitions around those calculations and my business rules, and then I am able to manage that and version it and send it out to my sites. Now, each site has the ability, if given, to modify the template if necessary and to add their individual context to these rules. Meaning, if I've called out something around, for instance, a shift calculation, the site can define their shift patterns. And I'm not hard binding any of my flow tags to a specific tag inside of a historian or a property inside of a table. So when I deploy these templates to site, the site sees, I need a temperature, I need a machine state, I need a batch ID. They know where to link to that data. All right, so now that we have the template complete, how do we start to share the information? So we've created the model. Flow is processing all of the calculations. And if you'd like to see more about how we actually process those calculations and all of the different ways we can slice data, I've got a link for you that you can watch either right now and pause this video or perhaps watch it afterwards. Now it's time to share this information. So remember, we have stored the outputs of our calculations. We've stored the attributes of our events. And we are linked to the underlying data sources. So if a flow tag has been established, we have inherited that link to the source. So when it's time for Flow to connect and share, we have two different ways that we do that. We do that by data sync, and we do that by REST API. So with a data sync, we can choose to publish on trigger or on schedule any information that Flow is aware of to your notification services, to other applications. So think of Power BI in this case. Power BI can receive all of the information that you want to visualize there and further transform there without having to have all of these integration rules live inside of Power BI. We're pre-processing data for your next level of analytics. This is great for machine learning. It's almost creating a plug-and-play system for your future machine learning models. We feed brokers real-time information. So as a tag changes that we're aware of, we can feed that change to a broker. As we calculate and have a new KPI or a new event occur, we can feed that information to a broker. And of course, data warehouse is a perfect use case for Flow because we are contextualizing and cleansing the data before it arrives there. So what is it that we share? Well, we share the information that we store. That means the time-sliced aggregated KPI of average temperature by batch for the day. The every hour batch temperature average can be shared. The calculated tag, remember the calculated tag that brought data from 2 different data sources, filters it based on condition, and then creates a new calculated tag inside of Flow? That can be shared like it's a real-time value. I can also share the tags and all of the attributes around the metric, as well as the events and all of the attributes around the event. If Flow knows about it, you should know about it. And there's one other thing that we do that I think is extremely special and will help you scale your analytics. When we link a tag as part of our model to a source, you can query raw data from Flow, and Flow will go down to the underlying data source and request that data and provide it to you in one single format. So it doesn't matter if we're making a SQL query or if we're pulling data from a legacy historian or a modern historian. You don't have to know about the structure of that database. You don't have to know how the tag is addressed. All you need to know is that Flow's model is connected to raw data, and you can pull that raw data via our API. So what does this look like to execute? What's the cost of ownership? We follow a very simple business model. We have a subscription of $14,000 per year per Flow instance. There's no limits on the number of data sources you connect to, the number of calculations that you run. If you decide to build dashboards inside of Flow for reporting, we don't charge you any extra fees for those dashboards or the number of data syncs or API calls that you make. It's really quite simple. You choose to host Flow on a VM or a server of your choice, whether it's on-site, on-prem, in your private cloud, or in an AWS or Azure environment of your choosing, and you pay $14,000 per year as your investment for that capability. We do offer volume discounts as soon as you get to your 5th instance, and we cap out with an unlimited plan for enterprise license agreements. There's 3 paths forward that you could take with us. You could do a proof of concept and download the trial license on your own from our website, or you could engage with us for a proof of value or a pilot. We've built an entire partner network of integrators that are experts at helping you use Flow to transform your data into information, and we have a team that will help advise you throughout that process as well. If you'd like more information, please reach out to us. You can do so using the email address info@flow-software.com. Thank you.